Here's a quote, and I'm really curious what you think about it. Self-discipline is the highest form of self-love. Self-discipline being the highest form of self-love. What do you think about that? Well, I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and he gave me this quote and another one, and asked me, what do I think about it? And I found it to be a very interesting discussion. And since I feel like I have a few unique perspectives to share, I'm going to go right ahead and tell you that I strongly disagree with this quote, with the statement, and that there's actually some kind of hidden pitfalls in it that we're going to explore in today's episode. So today is all about self-discipline and self-love. Hello and welcome to the Artful Maestro podcast. I'm your host, Nenad Leonart, a harpsichordist and historical organist that has kind of found himself living in the 21st century. And since that's the case, I went out and I learned how to do videos. I learned how to do programming. I learned how to do all the new modern different kind of stuff that is needed to succeed in the modern world. And right now I've created a couple tools. I have a few roadmaps on how to do that stuff. And I do help other classical musicians go the same path. So my dream is to have a world where classical music is actually flourishing and we are reaching the younger generations with the new media, with the kind of language that is supposed to be there in order for classical music to actually just survive. So if you're here and listening to this podcast, that's probably the reason why you are here too. Now, today it's going to be a more inner growth kind of themed episode, which is probably very important, if not at the core of everything that we're trying to build, because if we don't have a solid foundation of what we're building onto, then all kind of crumbles, right? There's a saying where you shouldn't start building on sand because if the sand moves, the whole house is going to go down. And today we're looking at actually these kind of foundations. It's around self-discipline, the actual truth behind it. And we're also going to look at self-love, which is it appears in the quote. And I feel like self-love is one of the most neglected things and also one of the most misunderstood things that we have in our modern day and age. So why don't we go into those topics and really discuss them in depth, giving you a little bit food for thought, giving you a little bit of a different perspective of someone who has been doing this kind of personal inner work for over a decade at this point. And I feel like I have some very, very core insights to share onto this topic. Now, before we dive into the episode, let me quickly mention the Artful Shop, which is the main sponsor of this podcast. The Artful Shop is a place for musicians where they can get merchandise to make as a present for other musicians or just to get for themselves, t-shirts, mugs, stuff like that. There's also for organists a couple sample sets over there and some other small things. So do go and check out Artful Shop. And when you're buying something, you can use the discount code Artful5 at the checkout, which is going to give you an additional 5% discount on anything that you are actually buying. Now, why self-discipline matters is kind of very straightforward, right? It's been something that's been taught for thousands of years. People are, if they ever wanted to achieve something, they kind of talked about self-discipline. It was a way of cultivating the human part and moving away from our animal part, right? Evolutionary speaking, we kind of evolved from monkeys. So self-discipline is kind of trying to beat the inner monkey, right? To get it into submission so you don't have to actually behave like a monkey throughout the day. And fortunately enough, we have the tools and we have the possibilities of doing that. So a lot of times when I talk to people, they say like, oh, I'm just not disciplined enough to do that. Or, oh, that's amazing, like how much self-discipline you have. Or, oh, that's crazy, like other people having like a self-disciplined life. I don't want to do that because I don't get to do the fun things that I actually wanted to do. So let's shed a little bit of light onto all of this, what's going on, like what's actually happening with these things. Basically, it's become a popular term, and so everybody's using it in a little bit of a different light. And I would just like to go with the core definition of what self-discipline is and why it actually matters. So there's like 3 aspects that you can see right away why self-discipline kind of matters for us, and which is also popularized a lot at the moment. If you go to social media, if you go anywhere, you'll hear these things over and over again. It's basically consistency over motivation. It's called showing up every day, even if you don't feel like it. And I think that is quite a good description. Also, when we are practicing, when we are looking at what's going on, when we are trying to like achieve a certain goal, even if we don't feel like it that day, we very well know that if we do not put in the work, it's not really going to get better. It's actually going to get worse. And there's also going to be guilt creeping in and all that kind of stuff. So basically the consistency is helping us achieve our goals, even if like the daily fluctuations of emotions maybe do not inspire us to do an action right away. So the second one would be building trust in yourself, which is a different one, which is kind of the, let's say, self-reliance type of thing. So if we have, let's say, a difficult task ahead of us, oftentimes we would feel a little bit insecure, like, how can I do that? How can I manage it? Will I be able to do it? And so on. So there's like this insecurity, there's a little bit of anxiety there. And with the help of self-discipline, people can actually go out and start doing the task and actually manage it. And once that they've managed the task, they grew as a person and they kind of built that self-trust that, hey, I can manage this stuff. Like whatever life throws at me, I can handle it. And this is a lot done through self-discipline. So by doing it over and over again, by applying self-discipline over and over again, you get to go there. And also it's like the path to mastery. All of us want to become masters in a certain field and to reach the goals that we want. So the way to stay on this path and to not deviate from it, to not like take detours or to just change everything altogether, it's kind of like by doing the same things over and over again, like applying discipline to do these things, that is actually going to help you to become the master in your field, like the one that you chose. You want to go there. And that all sounds pretty cool. Like it's a very great start for self-discipline. And let's dive into the components that it has and also how to cultivate it if you're maybe not as a disciplined person, before we then actually dive into the shadow kind of stuff. What's maybe like the pitfalls of self-discipline? Okay, so the components, they're very clear. It's self-awareness, so being aware of where you are, knowing your weaknesses, knowing kind of what triggers you, when you get kind of impulses, and so that you can actually start managing yourself, right? So it's self-awareness. but it's also like the focus on the so-called delayed gratification. So this is like a long-term thinking, not just, oh, here's a cookie in front of me and then just grabbing it, but actually finding out how can I implement delayed gratification in my life. And that's a pretty big one, actually. I don't know if you've heard about the marshmallow experiment. There's like this really cute experiment where they put kids like in a room, and then the study, like kind of psychiatrist or whoever did the study, they would tell the kids, hey, so here's like a marshmallow on the plate in front of you. I'm just going to go out quickly to grab something. And I'm going to be back like in 3 minutes. And if you haven't eaten the marshmallow in 3 minutes, you'll get a second marshmallow. Okay, so that's how they set up the study to test like the delayed gratification, right? If they eat the marshmallow right away, they get this instant gratification. But if they don't eat the marshmallow right away, but they wait a little bit, they know that this person is going to come and bring them another marshmallow. So they end up with 2 marshmallows, which is kind of double the reward, right? And what ended up happening is they went out and kids showed up with the most creative ways to delay their gratifications. Well, some would just eat the marshmallow right away, right? The person went out of the room, they just put it in their mouth. And some others, they would kind of try to push it away or just break off little bits of the edges so they kind of get a little taste, but they don't eat like the whole thing. Or some kids would just go and hide so they don't have to look at the marshmallow, because like that's a huge temptation right in front of them, right? And apparently they even tested like how these people did in life at a later point, and delayed gratification, like the ones that didn't eat the marshmallow right away, appears to be associated with a very higher life quality, a very much higher lifestyle, like more wealth in their life, better paid jobs, better careers, and so on. So there's a direct connection between long-term thinking, delayed gratification, and the quality of life. Like you just get to do more stuff, better stuff, if you don't throw yourself like at the first reward that you see. It's kind of putting money in the bank, right? It's like if you have, I don't know, $100, you can spend it right away and then they're gone, or you can invest them and then a couple years later you get return on your investments. So you have even more money than you started out with. That's the idea behind it. Then you have focus. And focus is something that is becoming increasingly important in today's world, where everything is kind of battling for our attention. So through self-discipline, it is kind of easy to maintain focus, like focus on one thing at a time, focus on the things that are important to you, not get distracted, not get sidetracked, but just actually be rooted in where you want to go and what you want to do, and everything else kind of use discipline to put it aside. And actually, resilience is a huge one, because by doing like the right things, by focusing on the long term, if you do the stuff in the right way, you will kind of get more energy over time. You will be better trained if you are doing any kind of sports, if you're doing physical activities, if you are practicing, if you are doing like a certain set of technical exercises, you will get better in that over time, which in turn creates resilience. So even if you get to experience some setbacks or something, it's much easier to bounce back quicker, because you have already an elaborated tool set and elaborated methods how you can go about it. Well, having said all that, let's look at how you can actually cultivate self-discipline within you. and that's going to be pretty fast. I'm just going to run through these. So it's basically about setting clear goals and not being vague. Whenever you're vague, it's kind of getting vague results. So don't be unclear, be as specific as you can be with your goals. Start small. Just start with the smallest manageable tasks. It's also kind of if you do like a large project, just chunk it up into, 20 or 30 parts, and then just work at one part at a time. So it feels like, oh, I'm accomplishing. Or you can imagine like reading a long book. It's just like, let's read one page at a time, and then just this page, and then just this page. Because with smaller goals, you get to keep on the momentum. Here's a big one. Use routines and habits. We will have a complete, I would say, like a program from Artful Maestro that is going to focus on building key components into your life, which are going to be routines and habits, which are going to be tailored to your specific needs. Like whatever you want to have as a career, whatever goal it is that you want to go there, you will have access to this program. And with the program, you will be able to transform your life in just 3 months, right? So you will be jumping from A to not B or C, but actually to, X or Y or Z, something like really, really far away, because it is going to transform everything that you do with the help of building routines and habits. And one of the great things is that self-discipline actually becomes easy, because once that you have trained yourself in something, you don't have to apply discipline all the time, but you can actually just go ahead and do that. And since you've done it so often, it becomes second nature. So you, like the self-discipline that you have, the willpower that you have, you can just use it on another place for another project. And that is actually the idea, how you can keep improving your life over and over again. Then you get to practice mindfulness, okay? If you are able to be aware of everything that's going inside of you, that is something that will cultivate the self-awareness that is needed to be even able to apply self-discipline. If something happens without you being aware of it, it will always be like this kind of monkey brain taking over, and you'll find yourself in a place where you didn't want to be in the first place, right? How often did you have like an idea or a thought, hey, I want to do this on my phone, and then you just take out the phone and you wanted to do that, but like 3 minutes later, you are on a website checking out this latest phone accessory that for some reason you just went over there, or like reading like a news article or something. So there's a bunch of triggers that are built into all of these apps, all of these technical things that we have, which are kind of made to suck us in, right? We talked about focus, sucking our attention into them, so you kind of lose track of what you set out to do. So by practicing mindfulness, you actually have more self-awareness, which will prevent that. Accountability is a big one. And accountability is something that a lot of people really need, because, again, it's very easy to just say to yourself, oh yeah, I'm going to do it, and then not do it, and then rationalize about why you didn't do it. So there could be all kinds of excuses. I didn't do it because of this or because of that, and so on. So if you don't share your goals, there's kind of no reason for you to actually follow through. And once that this kind of happens, like your inner chimp, the inner monkey in you will kind of figure that out and will never actually go the extra mile to really do the work that is needed. So make sure to kind of find somebody who you can be like an accountability buddy with, or who will hold you accountable. Like when you didn't do it, they're going to be like, what on earth is going on here? Like, why didn't you do it? And then you kind of have the mirror in front of you where you can go, okay, so I messed up, like this is what happened, and so on. We, by the way, have the community of Artful Maestro, like the Artful Maestro Inner Circle, where also people are doing things like that. So they are finding like-minded other individuals. There's also like all kinds of masterminds created where they support each other. And by finding like-minded individuals, you can just go like, hey, let's be accountability buddies. Can I send you over when I've done this task? And if I don't send it over to you, will you write me an email reminding me to send it over to you? So like it's kind of reminding you to do the stuff that you wanted, right? If you haven't done this ever, really, really make sure to find an accountability buddy that's really super powerful. And the last one is kind of self-compassion. And here is where we are starting to dive into like the shadow stuff. So self-compassion, saying that discipline isn't about being harsh on yourself, because if you falter, you want to learn from your experience and then move forward. Well, why don't we look into the shadow sides of self-discipline and like what the pitfalls are, so that you can really understand the sheer scale of what's going on here. So here's the important part. Self-discipline, while it is highly valuable, it can have shadow sides when taken to extremes or when applied in ways that are kind of misaligned with one's overall being. So you being a musician kind of tells me that you've probably experienced at least one or two of these. So let's just go ahead and look at them, what we have. So number one, of the shadow things around self-discipline would be over-rigidity and perfectionism. So there's the stuff that happens is loss of flexibility. I kind of stop being flexible in your ways of how you approach things, but kind of just being unable to get into new opportunities or adapt to certain circumstances because like you're too inflexible. Then also perfectionism, just setting unrealistic expectations and standards for yourself, where you're kind of never actually living up to them. And also neglecting joy. Like if you're kind of hyper-focused on that discipline thing, maybe you miss out on the important things in life. Maybe you miss out on seeing the really important people in your life, in connecting with peers, and just like having these joyous moments that kind of actually make life worth living. Number two would be the suppression of your emotions and your needs. And there's a big one. So it starts by ignoring emotional health, which is kind of suppressing natural emotions or impulses or needs that are kind of not trying to sidetrack you, but that are actually very important to you. But through self-discipline, like through the habit that built out of that, they are just not registered. It's just like paved over those, and there's like lost touch with the inner connection, which usually leads to the so-called burnout. And that is kind of the pushing through without giving yourself enough rest. Like even not just the emotional health aspect, but the general health aspect is going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to all different kinds of illnesses, sicknesses, pain in your body, and so on. So that's kind of going to really come and bite you. It can lead to all different kinds of long-term negative things that you have to deal with, but also like short-term decrease your productivity, take you off your path, and so on. Then, number three would be that you create for yourself an identity that is tied to productivity. So you don't know anything else. Like your whole self-worth is linked to achievement. And basically, always when you look at yourself, but also when you look at other people, you're just valuing like, what did they do? What did they achieve? What's like the thing that they got? And if they don't have anything, it's kind of, in your case, feeling like you've failed. And in their case, it's like, they are a failure. I don't want to like hang around with them. And what that also leads to is like a general fear of failure. So you kind of, because you feel like you need to achieve stuff and you've already achieved some stuff, if you would have kind of failed in the future, that would mean that you are not as good as you think you are. And maybe that you start becoming a failure. So what then happens is that there are kind of inner mechanism trying you to prevent from getting into a situation where you could fail, which means it prevents you to get into any new kind of situation. Remember when we talked about flexibility? So you kind of stay stuck in your own environment, and you're stuck in a way that you don't invite any type of possibility of failure in your life. So you don't actually get to succeed. You don't get to do anything. And that's really not helping you. Like that is totally counterproductive if you're going down the path of actually getting your goals. And by the way, self-discipline is going to become even harder when you're at that point, because you know, there's something pulling me back. So let's just try to discipline myself even more. And kid you not, there are so many mechanisms inside of you that will kind of turn up and to subconsciously prevent you from failing. You will not be aware of them, so there will be no awareness. They will just turn up and they will make you fail, just because of the fear of failure that you've developed. The next one is big for us artists, and this is like the disconnection from your intuition and from your creativity. Because when you stop listening to like every small impulse, right? Many people associate self-discipline with, here's a chocolate, and here's a nice thing, and here's a nice thing. So I don't want to get distracted at all. Like what I'm going to do is stay hyper-focused on my goals. And everything else is just kind of blended out. I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to feel it, nothing. Well, that's also oftentimes the inner guidance voice that is being just turned down. And with the loss of inner guidance, you kind of stay fixed on the one single goal that you have sometimes made for yourself. And especially in the arts field, where you want to follow creative impulses, where you want to follow like the motivation, inspiration type of thing, where this can create like real art, you've kind of destroyed those. And I don't know about you, but I see this one being a huge one with musicians. Like once they get in the trut of too much self-discipline, their art becomes like really, really stale. And the spark and the ignition that it used to have is kind of gone. Oftentimes, also like the creativity is just stifled, even if you like, let's say, discipline yourself to get into creativity, to get like into creative moments, because usually these thrive in flow and experimentation, and having like too rigid of a schedule or of a method of just approaching it, it's never going to really allow you to explore the full depth of your creativity. So it's, I don't want to say it's like the enemy of discipline, but it kind of is. Like how many like the really famous artists, right? When we look at the modern picture that's painted of artists, they're not like super disciplined, right? They're like working in the night and then getting super drunk or on drugs and then creating these beautiful pieces of art. It's not the reality, okay? There's a lot of discipline involved as well, but we're just kind of exploring right now what kind of the different methods are, or like the different pools. And by having too much discipline, you definitely kill the pool of creativity. Just be aware of that. Also, you're going to do a lot of harm onto relationships if not properly checked. So one is the imposing of discipline onto others. So if you have musicians who play with you, if you have like colleagues that you work together, you are automatically going to impose your standards onto them and like have your high expectations of them as well. And it's going to be really, really, really a buzzkill because you are not going to be fun to be around. That's going to be like a really high standard on one hand, but on the other, the way that you treat yourself, you will be treating them, or sometimes even worse, just with being impatient, just with being even rude sometimes. I know I've been there. It's not the nicest thing to admit, but I remember certain periods where I was under a lot of stress and we had to do very quick rehearsal and we had to go there, and like the cellist played the same wrong note that she played in the last two concerts as well, where I once told her like, hey, this is a C sharp, not a C, right? And then she played again a C and I kind of lost it. So I stopped playing and just looked at her and went like, I've told you this before, like this is the third concert, you better play it right. And she went like, So it's not the nicest thing that I've done, and I surely will refrain from doing that in future. But can you imagine like what that does to a relationship? Nothing good, I promise you. And the more you do that also, it can lead to actual isolation. So the more, let's say, self-disciplined you are, the more you live in your own bubble. And we discussed this also yesterday. Like, I could go out with friends and socialize and hang out with them, but I could also go and do my training. And like, what do I have from socializing with friends in 3 years? But when I do my training, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to be more fit, I'm going to be in a better health, and so on. And this is true, but again, in moderation, because if you completely lose track of everybody around you, you're like really isolated. And guess what? If you want to do any kind of work, you need connections. If you want to get invited to anything, you need connections. And if you have zero connections, well, let's say you can be the best at something, but nobody's going to care because nobody is going to be connected with you. Tunnel vision is also one. Tunnel vision is a heavy one, like just neglecting every other area of life. So let's say you have a goal in a certain part, and you say, I'm going to discipline myself to win that competition, so I'm going to do everything to go ahead and work on that competition. Your chances are really high that if you over-discipline, you're going to lose track of your health, of your relationships, of your marketing, of just like basically everything. If you start over emphasizing one goal and putting all your discipline into that, chances are high that everything else is going to suffer, and it's going to even probably suffer in a permanent long-term way. That kind of your discipline that is supposed to be the long-term beneficial thing is going to destroy that. So something to be aware of. Also, there is the possibility of missing bigger opportunities. Very many people, like the successful ones, when you ask them, they became successful by setting out to do one thing, but they kind of luckily stood open, like had an open mind, because another opportunity arose, presented itself to them, and they kind of took it. So usually it's not the thing that they set out to do originally that made them famous or successful or whatever, but also by them just staying open and looking at like what opportunities are there. And if there's like a very similar opportunity, maybe not exactly the thing that they pictured, but it's, let's say, close enough, or it's good enough, like it's still good, they will be able to take it. And the same thing goes for discipline. If you just use discipline to reach like one very specific singular type of goal, and you don't look at anything else aside of that, like not even near it, I don't know what the chances are about getting there, because that's what's called tunnel vision, and not many people report of having tunnel vision to actually succeed for something. Then you get the moral superiority or judgment kind of thing. So once that you are able to like have your discipline and hold your discipline for a long period of time, but maybe even if you don't hold it, but you think you are disciplined, you kind of get to be morally superior over others. You kind of get to be, oh, you know, I'm better than everybody else here. I'm more, you know, I'm more distinguished, or I'm smarter, or I'm just better, like in categories. And that's kind of harsh on everybody else there, because like you, especially when you let them feel that, it's not really a nice thing. And not just that, think back to the networking thing. You really want to be nice to people and you want to be of value to people. If you go into somewhere and you pretend like I'm the best anyway, nobody can do anything for me, you're kind of just disqualified. You're not even in that social circle anymore. You're just out, and do not be wondering why you're out. That's the reason. But also, there's going to be like internal shame. Like that's the flip side of it. Like when you don't meet your standards, it can be really painful, and sometimes so painful to admit that I even see this with like famous musicians when they do like a horrible performance. And believe me, I've seen more than one. There's like this whole internal dialogue going on where they feel like maybe the shame, but then they push it away, then they split it off, and then they project it onto somebody else. And then like somebody else was the bad guy, or, you know, did a bad job, or, oh, did you see how they played? Oh my God, that was horrible. And I'm like, you want to talk? Like, what's going on here? Anyway, that's the pitfalls of having these high standards. But also, there's going to be a risk of obsession and addiction. Just doing discipline to being disciplined, like practicing for practicing, that doesn't lead anywhere. But also like avoiding certain things through the structures that you've built. Like you can actually, because you have like, let's say your practicing schedule, everything in your life, and then there's probably certain things that are actually going to be really good for you, but you say like, oh, I'm really sorry, I don't have the time for it, I don't have the space for it, and you kind of miss out on something that would have been probably very great or beneficial for your career. And you didn't even really consider it because you thought of it just as, oh, this is just another distraction. It's going to pull me off my path of, you know, just practicing again and again and again. We'll look at this into some other episodes, like what's the most important thing that you can do, because probably it's not practicing, even though everybody told us that when you practice, that is like the most important thing that you can do for playing. It is not. It is not. There's some other things that are actually much more important than practice. However, we cannot talk about this in this episode. We will, though, in future, because this is also one of the main things that classical musicians in the next generation want to learn. Oh my God, that's so important. Well, to maybe kind of close it off, just to understand this paradox of freedom that you have with self-discipline. On one hand, if you do kind of live by the rules of discipline and if you have a disciplined life, that's really cool because it kind of gives you the resource of going after your long-term goals. However, you can, through that self-discipline, create a prison for yourself that is so elaborated that you're not even able to escape it. And that is just scary. That is really, really scary. Because imagine being enslaved by yourself, but this part that is kind of enslaving you covers its own tracks, so you don't know that that's going on, and it's in the background, like pulling the strings of a puppet that is you. And you actually said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go out and discipline myself, so I'm not like these other monkeys. I'm not in the jungle. I'm actually like a evolved human being that can take care of their life. And there's still like this puppet master from behind, like pulling you like an animal. So what you did was take the thing that you didn't want to be, and you became that just with a different expression. And probably for everybody here that is into self-discipline, that has practiced it long enough, you know that we have no chance against this inner animal. You know that it's always running the show, and that we have very few moments of being awake, of being actually present, of being fully here, and of being able to apply our willpower. The most time of the day, we are in that kind of animal behavior, like autopilot, not thinking about it, just doing the same thing over and over again. And no matter how much you train, you will never be able to get rid of that animal part of us. Okay, unless you become the Buddha or something. Like then, hats off to you. But before that, it's kind of basically impossible for us to even get near there. We are so much of an animal that is just guided by all these kind of dopamine getting stuff. Oh, this is a goodie. That's a nice thing. Let's collect them all. And when you really understand that, you are understanding like what self-discipline is really about, and how also like if you abuse self-discipline, you can get yourself into a really, really bad place, which is kind of protecting you from who you really are, but you think you're doing the right thing. And in the next episode, we are gonna go, as I've promised, a little bit more into self-love and how that correlates to discipline. And actually, I'm going to tell you my story, how I went into discipline and how kind of ruined my life with self-discipline by applying it in very, very wrong ways. It took me a long time to first see that mistake, that I went in the wrong direction. It took me a lot of time to even admit it, like that it actually happened, and then to take responsibility for it. And then I was able to like reshape the way that I wanted to go, and create a life that I felt like was the really good life for me. But it took me a lot of mistakes, and it took a real toll on my health. It took a real toll on my well-being. I was in I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to tell you in the next one. So if you're interested to hear the story and to also check out what was this self-love thing and why I am disagreeing that self-discipline is the highest form of self-love, make sure and tune into the next episode. Having said that, I hope that you got a lot out of it. I'm happy for all kinds of feedback. So you can just drop me a comment, send me an email, or just go and join the Artful Maestro group, where we have like the classical musicians community that I mentioned before. And that is the best place to actually discuss all these topics, because you will have also other people who are discussing these kinds of topics, exchanging experiences, maybe even how they would go about it, maybe also even like their kind of content that they've already made around that. So that is something that you really want to go and check out. Next episode is going to be about self-love and self-discipline, and kind of my story. That is pretty crazy, to be honest. And I feel very lucky that I am not at that point in my life right now, but at the point where I am here now. Have a good one, and see you in the next episode.